Good evening, everyone. Hello, good evening. We're going to do that one more time. Good evening, everyone. It's a little bit better, but it's raining, so I understand. Thank you all for being here. For those that do not know me, I'm Basil Smikle, that guy. I am the director of the Public Policy Program here at the Roosevelt House Public Policy Institute of Hunter College. So welcome and thank you all for braving the sudden rainfall that we had this evening. Before I go any further, I want to acknowledge and thank Harold Holzer, Dr. Harold Holzer, who is the director of this institute and runs this fine establishment. Thank you so much for your support, Harold. Just as a note, since we are on a college campus, Harold is one of the foremost scholars, not only in presidential politics, not only is he a presidential historian, but an expert in Abraham Lincoln with, I think he told me 50 books? A few more, okay. More than my zero. But please, for those of you who are interested in history, politics, and policy, seek out Harold's writing. I want to also thank the staff here at Roosevelt House, Bianca, Alexis, Peter, Danny, Phil, and Aaron, who have been instrumental in putting this together. We have some partners in this event as well. Blaine Stoddard, where are you, Blaine? Is he still upstairs? Probably still upstairs. Blaine Stoddard, who was very helpful to us today in bringing us together. Young Caribbean Professionals, the Caribbean Lawyers Association, Children of Jamaica Outreach, Gary Williams, it's good to see you, sir, and thank you for being such a friend to the family. Team Jamaica Bickle and Ira Jam Radio. There's something I want to say about this. There are two people that I've met that are career-long friends. One of them is Una Clark, Dr. Una Clark, I'm sorry, I didn't use the doctor at first, Dr. Una Clark, who is probably watching us now. She couldn't be here today, but she is a trustee of the City University of New York, and I want to say hello to her and thank her for all of her support. But the other person who has been a career-long friend, this is going 20-some-odd years, is Erwin Clare. So Erwin, thank you as always for your support. I was on your radio show yesterday talking about this event, so thank you. Blaine, there he is. Good to see you, sir. Thank you for your support for this event. President Rabb, unfortunately, could not be here at the moment, but she sends her regards and well wishes to Lisa and to all of us for a safe event. Mom, sorry she couldn't meet you, but she'll say hello soon. We have over 100 people on Zoom right now, so hello to all of the folks that are joining us on Zoom from around the world, not only here in the United States and in New York, but in Jamaica, in Canada, and England, though I think the one in England is a family member, so hello to Wolverhampton. Hello to the good people in Wolverhampton. I also, before I go any further, and I know I have to do this not just out of love, but also because I'll be punished, the first and best teacher I ever had, my mother is here. I'm Mom, and I avoided my spanking for the day. Great. So tonight's conversation is being recorded and will be available to watch afterwards. And it'll be available on our website. Our website is roosevelthouse.hunter.cuny.edu. By the way, my mother's a proud CUNY grad. For those that have gone to Lehman College, you walk in her footsteps in the Bronx. All right, you walk in her footsteps. Following the event, we're going to have a reception upstairs on the first floor in what we call the Four Freedoms Room. So just upstairs where you came in, and we have some light refreshments for everybody, and you all are welcome to attend. We are doing some Q&A afterwards, so just listen for instructions as we end the event, as we're coming to the end, about being able to answer or ask questions of Lisa, and we look forward to that and to your participation. I'm very excited to have Lisa here, and I'll talk a lot about her in a second. But what I'm fascinated by is history, and in doing some research for the event, came across some old footage from 1984, 1985. Apparently, 38 years ago today, Hunter College was able to host Michael Manley for Now, apparently, my understanding, this event was called, it was a conference, the Caribbean Basin and Regional Development in the 21st Century. And the former Prime Minister, who I don't think was Prime Minister at that time, was the keynote speaker of that event. So suffice to say that with Lisa here today, this is really an important step in making this college and this space, the Roosevelt House Public Policy Institute, a center for discussion and research, and hope that all of you will consider this as a home for discussion and research, not only with respect to Jamaica, but for the Caribbean, so that we can continue this legacy. It was a great find, and it's something that I'm sure that we can continue to move forward with. But today we honor and welcome Lisa Hanna, a respected, courageous voice in CARICOM, a leader in the People's National Party, a former cabinet minister of youth and culture, a shadow minister for foreign affairs and trade, and the 4-term elected member of parliament for the constituency of Southeast St. Anne, which I am proud to, am I a constituent now? No, you're in Northeast. Northeast? Okay. But I call you all the time for problems. So, and you help, so thank you very much. That is going above and beyond, and that's what we love to see our elected officials do. During her lifetime, she was appointed United Nations Development Program Goodwill Ambassador, and reigned as Miss World 1993, serves as the director of Lit for Logistics, Jamaica's premier value-added agriculture and food processing facility. But she's best known as a passionate activist, helping marginalized people, women, and at-risk youth all across Jamaica and certainly across the Caribbean, a message that she's championed for as long as she can remember, certainly going back to her life as a teenager. She became Jamaica's youngest female member of parliament when she was elected in 2007 to represent St. Anne. And cementing her commitment to women and children, Lisa launched a housing project for single at-risk mothers so they could provide a safe home for their children and gain some financial independence. She also continues to support small farmers by providing access to training, farming tools, and simple irrigation systems so that they can build their businesses and sustain themselves and their families. As Minister of Youth and Culture, Lisa quickly made her mark as a protector of disadvantaged children, earning high favorability ratings among her neighbors, constituents, and Jamaicans as a whole. Her policies increased the number of children in state care qualifying for tertiary education by 30 times. She worked to end the prison pipeline by removing children from adult correctional facilities and built child-friendly spaces at several police stations across the country. She also placed 855 children with foster families and cleared a 900 case backlog that allowed children to be adopted into safe and loving homes. In 2016, she convinced the U.S. Embassy to sponsor Jamaican-born, internationally acclaimed Dr. Nadine Burke Harris, former Surgeon General of California and founder and CEO of the Center for Youth Wellness in California, to come to train the staff at the Child Protective and Family Services Agency in Jamaica. And that same year, Jamaica moved up 52 places on the UNICEF Kids' Rights Index to be ranked 51 out of 162 countries. These are combined efforts on her part that certainly yielded tangible results and rewards. Her efforts to expand the Caribbean and Latin American attention to food security, trade, and the global economy, and matters concerning gender and other kinds of security related to gender are certainly noteworthy. In 2021, Lisa added newspaper columnist to her resume. She began writing a stirring weekly column in Jamaica, and if you are not following her on Instagram, you should, because you could see you could see it every week, right? So this column is a weekly column in the Jamaica Observer, where she shares solutions about how to build a stronger Jamaica with her readers. She believes that each one of us is able to make a difference in the lives of those around us. I saw in one of those postings that she quoted Rudyard Kipling. And she took one line, which I'm going to paraphrase, and say that what I've learned about Lisa, knowing her and watching her, is that she certainly has the ability to walk with kings and keep the common touch. Additionally, this is the last line of that poem, she knows how to fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run. She's busy, and for good reason. But I also want to quote an author, feminist, activist, the warrior poet Audre Lorde, who graduated from Hunter in 1959. She said, "Sometimes we are blessed with being able to choose the time and the arena and the manner of our revolution, but more usually, we must do battle where we are standing." She's a mother, wife, politician, member of parliament, advocate, entrepreneur, and she's here with us this evening, Lisa Hanna.
Thank you, Dr. Smikle, for your words of encouragement and just for being an amazing Jamaican who's blazing a trail, educating so many people and placing them on the world stage to go and do tremendous things for the world, and my friend, more importantly. Harold Holzer, the director of the Roosevelt Institute, thank you for your short history lesson a while ago. It was awesome. Partners Irie Jam Radio, Team Bickle, Children of Jamaica Outreach, Young Caribbean Professional Network, and the Caribbean Attorney Network. Ladies and gentlemen in the audience, friends who are here, it is my distinct pleasure to be standing on this hallowed ground of the Roosevelt Institute this evening and to be a part of the Hunter College fraternity. This is my first time on the campus, and I want to thank you for inviting me, because I believe colleges like Hunter play such a vital role in ensuring not only that people are educated, but that there is a social consciousness among our people who are coming out of educational institutions, because it's one thing to be an academic, but there's another thing to understand how to use your academia to make a difference in the world. And I want to really congratulate Hunter, because the graduates that I've met from here understand what I remember a professor saying to me about Chief Seattle, that everything is connected. And once you understand that things are connected, then you're able to apply whatever you've learned across the board. So thank you for inviting me to be here this evening. When Dr. Smikle spoke to me, he said, you know, Lisa, one of the things that we would like you to consider is really, how do we make young people more interested in the region? And the truth is, as a Gen Xer, dealing with an electorate, especially that are coming forward, the Gen Zs and certainly the millennials who are there, and I'm married to someone who is a boomer, and so he has no clue about how to ignite the imagination of the generations coming. I really had to sit down and think about what are some of those things that we're going to have to do. And when we talk about, I'm an unapologetic regionalist. And what do I mean by that? I think all of us, if we have a passport and we're from the Caribbean, our passports say CARICOM, and then you have your individual country that's on that passport. But the truth is, how do we really identify as Caribbean nationals? And I want you to think about that for a little bit. How do we really identify? I mean, all of us, whenever Usain is running or Shelley is running, whenever they're on the world stage, and certainly Kirani James and Anderson Peters, we all rally as one. And if we're honest, we think that the reverence for the West Indies cricket team, that's just supernatural. And then you have greats like Bob Marley, and you have, you know, Rihanna, and you have Machel Montano. And these are world superstars. They're not only world leaders, but they're world beaters. So when we consider the region, we do have stars that are coming out of the region. But the truth is that I don't think the generation 50 years ago, we are not the same generation that existed 50 years ago. The Williams, the Burnham, the Adams, the Michael Manley, who had the kind of courage to understand that if you ignited the imagination of young people and if you built their social consciousness and if you educated them, that you are going to propel the region forward. So what I want us to consider is that our region's population numbers are minimal. But as a bloc, we actually represent 8% of the world's nations. More importantly, in a global economy where principal positions are eroded almost every day to might is right, politically and economically, in difference to smaller countries must stand as one. And I've always believed that because we're better off standing together than alone. Because when CARICOM was actually formed on July 4, 1973, it was really to improve regional integration in a politically polarized world. An honest assessment, however, is that I believe we have failed in that objective for the kind of regional integration that we need. Notwithstanding this, the principles of CARICOM are even more critical today than ever, as the world has changed dramatically since the early 1970s. And of significance, the Group of Seven Nations, the G7, was established around the same era of CARICOM. And at that time, the world's largest manufacturers came from those 7 countries. And they were exporters as well. But today, they've been overtaken by the European Union, created in 1993, along with Asia's rise, particularly China as the second largest global economy. And with Africa's natural resources, and last year when it signed, a lot of the countries signed what was called the non-tariff intercontinental trade agreement, where now goods can be produced and move without barriers to entry and no tariffs. Soon, Africa is going to disrupt international trade as a powerful force. So the economic axis, as far as I'm concerned, has shifted to Asia, but is shifting also to Africa. So, as I was saying before, the generation of leaders that existed 50 years ago really had a passionate resolve to disrupt and conquer oppressive ideologies tied to our colonial past. Manley, Burnham, Adams, Williams were clear that to move the working class to the middle class and the middle class to owners of capital, that the youth had to be empowered. You couldn't do it without young people. And you had to educate them, you had to give them social dignity, you had to give them economic mobility. And at the time, and even today, when politicians still speak about leaders, they still speak about these men because their voices resonated with courage on the global stage. Today, there is actually no new world coming. It's actually already here. So anybody that's thinking that something is going to change is living vicariously with a degree of patience that no longer exists. Our challenge is to motivate the collective will of the generations coming forward, not to relegate them to the ranks of isolationism, but instead we need to urgently and proactively ignite their imagination to unify and lead a modern, regenerated region aligned with the emerging economic rise of our allies in Africa and Asia. You know, in the 1970s, those leaders spoke about South-South cooperation, but it never really materialized in the way that I think Manley visualized or wanted it to happen. It can happen now, and we should make it happen because our per capita incomes with persons in Africa are very similar to those in the Caribbean. So the importance of the diaspora, how much time do I have? Okay, stop me anytime. The importance of the diaspora is crucial to the region's social development and the future economic growth of whatever we intend to do. But the reality is that approximately half the populations of the Caribbean or their direct descendants live overseas. So for example, only 50% of Guyanese actually reside in Guyana. 30,000 of them leave annually, of which 80% emigrate to North America. The ratios are the same for Barbados and Trinidad and Tobago. Their diaspora equates to almost half of their populations. And roughly 1.8 million people of Jamaican origin reside in the United Kingdom, Canada, and the United States. Sadly, and if we were paying attention this year, the Human Flight and Brain Drain Index for 2022 ranks Jamaica second out of 177 countries for the economic impact of our human displacement. Them just a leave. But Caribbean nations are not homogeneous, either in culture or economic development. And a closer look at the per capita incomes in 2019 for our 4 larger countries in CARICOM reveals the following. Jamaica, $8,700 US. Barbados, $15,600 US. Guyana, $18,700 US. And Trinidad and Tobago, $25,800 US. In the United States, where the per capita income is $35,800, our respective diasporas can earn anywhere from 50% to 400% more annually if they moved or lived abroad. The importance of the diaspora, however, is crucial to our region's social development and future economic growth. Jamaica, for example, exported US $1.2 billion worth of goods in 2021. But its remittance receipts were almost 3 times that amount at $3.4 billion. Therefore, if the collective exports of our 3 million people residing in Jamaica are only 1/3 of the amount sent back by overseas Jamaicans, it could be argued that Jamaicans living abroad are the single most significant contributors to our economy. Now that's a no, but it's a serious fact. Jamaica's highest earnings for national exports for 2021 came from bauxite and alumina at $470.7 million US. Rum, 56 million. Coffee, 11.9 million. Yams, 36.5 million. Coffee, 17.2 million, the great Jamaican coffee. Ackee, 24.5 million. Sauces, 33.7 million. So if we're talking about development, and when you look at those numbers, that's not a lot if you're talking about exports. Because if you are trying to grow your economy, you have to sell to the world. You can't just sell to the 3 million people that's living in your country. And right now, these numbers symbolize that we're only exporting samples. Take bauxite out of it. And rum, which is a 300-year-old industry, is still our #1 export outside of bauxite. Yeah, 56 million. Bauxite was 470 million. So if we're talking about development, we recognize the economic power of the Caribbean diaspora, and we must find ways to harness it for our collective progress better. I believe that the future lies in expanding CARICOM, not reducing it. And herein lies the opportunity for everybody sitting in this room, all young people, because Basil is my age.
But why?
But we are the same age.
We're young.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. The opportunity for young people in our diaspora to offer enlightened leadership, which reassesses our approaches across the board and reorganizing that the one-size-fits-all is outdated and misaligned with the current expectations for a life worth living. In other words, it's time for regeneration of our region. So we must work on strengthening the region, forging a new togetherness that boldly signals to the world that we're finally serious about what we're doing. Today's world is rooted in technology driven by millennials between the ages of 16 and 36, making up 23% of the global population. In 2020, millennials had the most spending power of any generation in our history, close to $2.5 trillion US. Roughly 80 million of them are in the United States, and they spend $600 billion annually. Hi, Karine. In less than 10 years, 3 out of every 4 workers, 75% globally, will be millennials. We should start by incentivizing our young people to either return home, offer them citizenships or passports, and create attractive and more accessible investment opportunities. For example, and I don't want nobody to jump on me with this, but for example, Erwin, steps could be taken perhaps to waive the 25% tax on interest income for legitimate overseas residents. But you'd have to find a way to make sure that the ones that are living in Jamaica don't send their money to their overseas family accounts so that they could get the benefit. But it's some way, it works. It will be better, you'd be in a better position to now encourage persons to invest by having, getting access to capital. And with interest rates going up, we need people to continue to invest rather than hold their money in bank accounts. But that's a whole nother discussion for a whole nother time. Currently, however, the greatest deterrent from Jamaicans returning home, I remember last year I did an article, Why Not Retire in Jamaica? Every single comment, I think there must have been hundreds of comments under that article, was about crime. Nobody wanted to come back to Jamaica. It was either crime and a minimal amount about health care. So the greatest deterrent from Jamaicans returning home is the levels of crime and violence. Recently, the United States issued advisories for Trinidad and Tobago and Jamaica. Crime currently costs Jamaica approximately 5% of our gross domestic product due to business losses, reduction in property values, missed investment opportunities. So that's about $105 billion, or $39,000 per person who lives in Jamaica. So imagine what we could do with an additional $105 billion if we had that, if we could solve this issue, we could transform Jamaica. Currently, the government of India offers bonds to non-resident Indians, which aid in funding their education systems throughout India, and they've been doing that before the turn of the century. They issued the first ones, Basel, the Millennium Bonds, which were to fund education, and they're still offering them, and they fund basic community education, and they're very, very specific about how they fund that. And I believe that Jamaica should offer a diaspora bond to equip its police force with critical capital equipment and support the necessary social interventions and cognitive behavioral therapy programs that are needed in our schools. Now, I've written several articles on crime and violence, and all of the experts and psychiatrists say that it takes one generation to solve it. It's not an overnight fix, it's about 15 years. And what you need are 4 stages of preventative measures. You need to deal with the children from 0 to 6. You need to go into the communities. You need to have better nutrition. You need to make sure that the counselors are in place. It's an integrated system of prevention so that you don't have these adverse environmental effects that are plaguing our children, because close to 41% of Jamaica's population, they say, this was a study done by the late Freddie Hicklin, says that 41% of our population have personality disorder issues. So if you can, go back and read those articles that I've written, because no one wants to deal with those things that are happening. And what they are looking at is how these adverse environmental effects are continuing to create it. So I believe that the diaspora has an integral role to play if we are going to be creating more sustainable investment projects, because anytime something is intractable, we call on the diaspora. There are creative ways to now have remittance loans. The World Bank is looking at things like that. Creative ways to have investments. But we are not aligning ourselves to the purpose of the imagination of what the younger generations want to go into. It's why the World Economic Forum recently published that tourism is changing. Nobody wants necessarily to have one type of tourism. They want to know that if they come to a particular country and spend their money, there's a multiplier effect that's actually helping young people in a particular area. So there's an alignment of global purpose that younger generations want. It's not the same as the generations of leaders coming before, and I think leaders and politicians are missing the mark in understanding specifically what it is that they need to do to ignite that imagination. Deloitte came out with a study, I believe it was last year, where they were looking at Gen Zs and millennials. And apart from the paycheck that they were going to get, the number 2 reason why they would not take a job is if the company's purpose did not align with theirs. If they felt that company didn't represent what they believed in, that was critical to move and influence the world to be a better place, they weren't going to work there. It's no different from running your country. And I think we've been too lax in doing things the same way, and our institutional memory continues to kick in. And that's where the red flag is, because we're doing the same thing the same way over and over. There's so many good things that are happening in the diaspora. I mean, everybody sitting in here does something for our country, for your respective countries. So actual development doesn't happen by signing a contract or doing a public relations photo opportunity. Our people are over the box and promise. I call it box and promise, because box and promise is like you say, all right, we have a term for it, but I can't say it publicly. It's when you hurriedly do something and you don't necessarily finish. But we're over the box and promise short-term programs. People want to feel the real change that improves the qualities of their lives with the economic climate and mindset to increase their per capita income, not once in 50 years, but continually. That's how people feel real development. So it's time we make proactive adjustments to our economic policies, which strategically allow the participation of our non-residents for our region to become global producers rather than global consumers, living in a world that's marginalized without borders. And I'll be happy to answer any questions from Basil and you on how we can expound on some of these things. So thank you for listening, and I welcome any questions.
Thank you. So just a few housekeeping things. We have some golf pencils and index cards. If you have a question, please write it down, and somebody will collect those from you, and I'll be happy to offer them to Lisa. One thing that I did not say, and I should say, because this place is actually very special, and I'm so glad that we all could come today together. As I was talking to folks beforehand, they were surprised that this space existed. But it is the former home of Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt. And in fact, it's technically 2 mansions. The Roosevelt's mother, Sarah, gifted the young couple the mansions for their wedding. But she was a doting mother and didn't particularly like Eleanor. So that's why there are 2 mansions, one for her and one for the new couple. So when you go upstairs, you'll see that it's sort of 2 different buildings joined together. The second floor, where we met earlier, was actually the room at the time that Roosevelt was elected president. The inaugural was in March, not January, when it is now. So in those months between November and March, on the second floor in that room, in that library, is where Roosevelt sketched out the New Deal and worked with his secretary, his first Secretary of Labor, Frances Perkins, who was the first woman to be a cabinet member in the history of the United States government. So this is a very historic place, and we're very thankful that you all could be here with us today, and that Lisa is here talking about really important issues that affect not just the Caribbean, but the diaspora. I actually wanted to start, Lisa, by asking you to expand a little bit on this issue of crime. We're dealing with crime here in New York. And it's a phenomenon all over the country, and it's a big topic in the in every campaign from Congress to governor to president. Uh, there are a lot of conversations around what is working, what can work. There's been a lot of conversation about mental illness driving crime. Could you talk a little bit more about, young people in this space? Are they acting as violence interrupters? Are they, do they have the resources they need to sort of to take on this issue so that they're not leaving?
The short answer is no. They don't have the resources to take on the issues. Just speaking for Jamaica, 18% of our population of men between the ages of 18 to 26 are responsible for 75% of our murders in Jamaica. And our levels in terms of our numbers, based on the definition of civil war and how many people are killed, Jamaica is actually at civil war. And the World Health Organization would define us as having an epidemic of crime. Last November, I remember there were 12 people that were murdered in one day. Now, this is heinous and startling, and but what is happening is when you dig deeper into the information, when the men are interviewed, some of them, men who have murdered or boys who have murdered once or more than once, 70% of them said that they were tortured by their mothers with violent discipline. So when you interrogate the issues from the sociologists, the psychologists, and the psychiatrists, and unfortunately, we also don't have child psychiatrists in Jamaica. We don't have enough of them. We don't have enough child guidance clinics either.
And what about, do you have guidance counselors in schools?
We do, but we don't have the levels that are needed based on what we're seeing in terms of the violence. Most recently, there was a young woman who was stabbed violently at Kingston Technical. What needs to happen, and so you have people like Dr. Earl Wright, you have Herbert Gale, Dr. Herbert Gale, you have Professor Winty Davidson, who are saying that you have to target the ages from 0 to 6. That cognitive development of a child's brain and what you feed that child mentally, socially, is so critical, and all of those factors are 4 stages of prevention, because driving fear into a population is not going to stop it. So if we want to really address crime and violence, it's going to take 15 years, based on what the experts are saying. And it's going to take all hands on deck. This is not only a police issue. This is both political parties have to work together. Private sector is now doing something with Project STAR, the PSOJ, where private sector individuals have invested to try and interrupt violence and bring it down by 30% originally in the start in 20 communities across Jamaica. And they're doing other things in terms of going into those communities. But the original question, which is, do you have the resources? That's why I spoke about the diaspora getting involved. We have to have more resources to give the police the intelligence equipment, give them the cars that they need, give them the ability to have human dignity in their jobs. And we also need to have a push where we train more child psychiatrists and child psychologists, because currently our university is there. So perhaps there needs to be some kind of relationship, technical relationship, maybe between UE or UTech with Hunter, because I know you have a psychology degree here.
Okay, we will investigate that. Okay.
But there are some real things that need to be done. I know the government has a commission which has Dr. Herbert Gale and Dr. Maureen Sams Vaughan on it, but that work is slow in coming forward, and it needs to be fast-tracked quickly if we're going to interrupt and really lessen and fix the issues of crime and violence, which I think is the most important thing for us to fix.
Okay. I'll ask Bianca hey Bianca, and thank you again for your help today, to collect the index cards for folks that have questions, and I'll start to take them. In the meantime, we're in a very difficult moment in the history of this country. For probably the first time in its history, the United States is part of a list of countries that are experiencing what's called democratic backsliding.
Or backsliding.
Real concerns about the health of our democracy. And we also see on occasion comments about young people not being engaged or not caring, but then at other times when I talk to students here and in other programs, students are very engaged. They understand what's going on. What they're not necessarily doing is making a choice to belong to one political party or another because they don't feel the affinity to either. Is that something that you're seeing in Jamaica, across the Caribbean, or do you feel that the parties are going to have a bright future with young people coming up in the ranks?
You know, it's funny, I was reading an article recently in the Wall Street Journal which spoke about global authoritarianism actually taking place in the world, even though persons speak about wanting a more liberal kind of democracy. And so you saw in Italy where a very far-right person was elected. You see what's going on in Brazil and other countries. You see what's actually taking place here in the United States. In Jamaica, you would have seen that only 38% of those who were eligible to vote in 2020 actually came out to vote. Typically, both political parties have a base of 400,000 that they're playing with. So whoever can get out the undecided will win, or another segment of your voters you can win. The unfortunate thing is that the role of the politician to a young person in Jamaica is as clear as mud. Meaning there is really no reverence for politicians. Your mother's generation was perhaps around Michael Manley, and then there was a generation of Norman Manley. That was a different ilk because they were coming at a time of apartheid, they were coming at a time of the Cold War. There were distinctive ideologies that you could frame your narrative around, that you wanted to get rid of oppressive systems that kept the masses down. Today, my son born and see maternity leave with pay, equal pay for equal work. Those things are normal. So unless you ignite the imagination and unless you have bold leadership to move them and transform them, they will not align to you.
Well, let me ask you, let me pivot from that for a second or pivot off of that for a second before I get into this first question, because you've been outspoken about where Jamaica should be relative to the monarchy.
Correct.
We are seeing what's happened in Barbados with Prime Minister Motley. And is the sentiment toward the monarchy also generational? Are young people saying this is an opportunity?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just recently, I took Vice News to Ferncourt in my constituency, and the young people were very clear that we need to leave the monarchy. They have no affinity with being a part of a system that's oppressive. They spoke about colorism, they spoke about bleaching, they spoke about having the kind of mental enslavement that the vestiges of slavery brought. They spoke about the tremendous wealth extraction of the Victorian era that was post-slavery all the way up to the early 1900s. So they're very, very clear that it's time we become the final arbiters of our own destiny. And they want to see somebody who looks like them, who is a Jamaican, being the president and head of state of our country, I think not that I think, they were very, very open about it. And most Jamaicans are. The generation that harkens back to the time of kings and queens being our head of state is post-World War II, and maybe a boomer, but certainly the millennials, the Gen Zs, the Gen Xers, the Generation Alphas are clear on what they want to see happen for Jamaica. There needs to be more public education around it, but the objectives that they have in their minds are at one.
Okay. I'm going to go to some questions here. There may be some questions from the folks on Zoom as well, so if we can monitor those and maybe we can get to one or two of them. I may combine a few just in the interest of time, but one question here, you spoke about the 41% of Jamaicans with some form of mental disorder. Do you think parenting played a role, or what role can parents play? Do parents play?
Okay, I want to be clear on personality disorder and a mental disorder. The psychiatrists tell you that they're two different things. And I think it's a little bit more. I think it's actually closer to 47%. So a personality disorder is where you actually have an adverse environmental effect consistently, which affects your personality and your ability to function. So your ability to have conflict resolution issues, you're angry. A mental disorder is a cognitive imbalance. So schizophrenia, etc. And what the psychiatrists actually tell you is that some people who have mental disorders are not quick to harm others. They're more quick to harm themselves. So when I was doing the research, looking to do those articles, and I came out with the conclusion that it really is the personality disorders that are affecting us. I mean, how does one person go in and slash the throat of 5 people because you ask them back for how does a young woman at a high school get into an argument and decide to stab another young girl to death on a school's campus? These are not things that are normal. Something went wrong, it went unchecked, and it continued to fester. So a sociopath the signs are there. You see the signs, but the problem is a lot of our parents are not seeing it. A lot of our schools are not catching it. So we need, and I don't want to say that it's bad parenting. A lot of Jamaicans grew up in single-headed households. And a lot of Jamaicans actually, and persons from the region, were not wealthy, well-off people. But they were clear on a value system that was crucial to propel them forward. What is happening now is something very, very different. And we need to interrupt those ACEs that are giving children the kind of toxicity, trauma, because one of the things Nadine Burke-Harris says is that if you have this continuous trauma, it's going to affect your primary health and your primary health care facilities too, because it gives you other forms of illnesses. So parenting is from the perspective that the parents are not identifying it. And also sometimes, as I said before, Basil, 70% of those who have murdered more than once says that they were tortured by their mothers. There was one incident when I was speaking to Dr. Herbert Gale where the mother tied the child to a tree, poured condensed milk on the child for the ants to bite of the child, and was cussing the ants when it was not going to the child. You have some really heinous things that are happening, and we have to reorient our parents that children between 0 to 6, certainly 0 to 3 is your fastest brain development growth, but 0 to 6, the personality of that child is formed. And if you don't, once that personality is formed, if something goes wrong and you don't catch it by 13, it is, and this is what the experts say, this is not what Lisa Hanna says.
Here's an interesting question. Is the transgender population and LGBTQ plus population in Jamaica faring better today than compared to yesterday?
I think Jamaicans, not generally, are more tolerant of a worldview where LGBTQ and S resides. But unfortunately, we still have laws on our books which says that rape is defined by the entrance of the penis to the vagina. So once there's any other entry, it's considered buggery. And those things have also repercussions. So technically you can't rape a boy in Jamaica because of the laws. So because we're still a very Christian-oriented country, a lot of the Christian churches, advocacy groups are still very strident that that law needs to remain on the books. And we're not a theocracy, but typically persons in leadership are sometimes a little less enthusiastic to try and change anything that would go against the church.
We talked about being young, and I realize I do not have my glasses up here. So,
well, don't give it to me because I'm like this.
well, I am like this now. You talked about brain drain. Did you say that there were 400 teachers that left? Did I hear something about that?
Yeah.
So what can be done to prevent brain drain, if at all? And is it better opportunities for people, for these professionals there? Housing, perhaps, which some has been discussed here, assistance for teachers or police officers for housing to keep them in certain communities.
I mean, one of the statistics that I gave is that if you move to the North America, your per capita income can increase by 300 or 400% if you're coming from Jamaica. So whereas the per capita income here is 35,700, in Jamaica it's 8,700. And I believe our teachers are the most critical person who can transform the life of any human being. And so we need to pay them what they're worth. With inflation and everything else that's happening, many of our Jamaican teachers cannot meet their standard of living. They can't meet basic living needs. But also, with some of what is happening in our schools with our children, they can't function either because of extreme pressures with the lack of resources, even in our school system. So COVID was one issue where you had, the children were not in school and many of them just didn't have access to broadband or technologies. So if they get a better opportunity, they're gonna leave. What do I think Jamaica can do? Identify those things that we need to focus on. Crime and violence, education, healthcare. Drive those, have bipartisan solutions for them, fast track them and implement them. But in order to do it, you also need to grow the economy so that we can pay people well and increase their per capita income. And there are ways to do that. Pick winners and go all in. Value-added agriculture, the creative industries, medical tourism, ganja. But we tend to talk around these things. And for too long, we've been talking around them. I will come and go from politics, and we're still talking around them. So there comes a point where you draw a line in the sand and say, look, we're now here. Jamaica is either going to prevail as a global titan, or we're going to survive as being mediocre. And just building hotels with offshore ownership is not the way to do it. We actually have to put ownership in the hands of Jamaicans as well in other businesses and give them and incentivize them with the tools of trade to build and really make sure that we create the export industries to earn the foreign exchange.
Okay. I have just a couple of more questions. I'm going to ask them quickly, and we'll ask for a quick response as well. There are going to be two parts to this question. The first is, what can Jamaica do to capture the increase in opportunities through remote work? How can we use it to elevate the quality of jobs on the island? How can the diaspora support this process?
Well, first of all, you have to have a tremendous broadband network across the country. And the Universal Service Fund is trying to do that. I now have 4 sites in my constituency, but the intra-island connectivity is the hardest. It's about, I think, 500,000 meters that you have to run. So we can do, the diaspora can get involved by saying, look, Jamaica, I see where the minister is now trying to have low Earth interlink satellite. That's a step in the right direction, and that's commendable. But Jamaica needs to be turned into one big hotspot so that young people can work remotely. You no longer have to be geographically in a place to be able to work in a place or to have a visa to get there. So, but we have to fix those issues, and hopefully the minister can get those done quickly. I believe with the satellite technology we can do it.
I'm going to combine a couple of questions and ask this try to ask it succinctly as possible. Is the Prime Minister, maybe current, I know this is a loaded question, but is the Prime Minister current, or does the Prime Minister, as an office holder, have the ability and the power to really address the issue of crime and the prison pipeline? Or is it something that is a little bit more sort of dispersed around the bureaucracy or elsewhere?
The short answer is yes, he does. But it really comes down to political will on all sides. I think we all have a vested interest to make sure that we solve this, and all of us should make sure that we put our hands and hearts into putting the things in place that will solve it.
Okay. As a final question, what would you leave us with today? Give us some marching orders. Give us a call to action to take away from this conversation.
I think everybody sitting in this room is on a mission. Everybody sitting here, including you. And the mission of your generation, or the mission of your life, is to add value to your space. Because if your presence doesn't add value, then your absence won't make a difference.
Yeah, say that again. We have it recorded, but say it again, please.
If your presence doesn't add value, then your absence won't make a difference. So whatever you do, add value. But it's time that we add collective value. I said we should never be relegated to the ranks of isolationism. And unfortunately, I think the last couple of years, we've been very individualistic and isolationist in running our own rat race. And it's time that we team up. They say if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, you need to go together. And it's time we go together.
And we are here with you going together. Thank you so much, Lisa, for your time today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. We do have a reception upstairs, which